This is the 33rd video in our series, looking at how to complete a basic setup and configuration of a Synology Network Attached Storage Device, or as they're more commonly referred to, a NAS. The only way to make our NAS truly secure is to not connect it to a network or the internet. However, as this would defeat the object of owning a NAS in the first place, we need to try and make our NAS secure by creating layers which aim to deter all but the most dedicated of hackers. One of the layers that we can enable and then configure is something called a firewall. Within a typical home network, you should find that you already have a firewall which is enabled. Usually this firewall is the one that's included in your wireless router. The aim of this firewall is to protect our home network from attack via the internet. So in theory, there should be no need to enable the firewall on our NAS. However, if a device on our network should become compromised, because that device is behind our router's firewall, that device could be used to attack our NAS. So it might be a good idea to consider also enabling the firewall on our NAS. In overly simplistic terms, our NAS is just really a series of services. So for example, there will be a service that allows us to access network shares, a service that allows us to listen to our music library, and a service that allows us to share web pages with other computers. As running all of these services will result in a lot of data traveling through our home network, there needs to be a way to direct specific types of data traffic to specific services on our NAS. This is done by tagging different data types with specific numbers that in computer jargon is referred to as a port number. So for example, if we wish to view a web page being hosted by our NAS, the web browser on our computer will first need to make a request to our NAS via port 80. As the web server on our NAS will be listening to port 80, our NAS will know that a request has been made for HTTP data. The web service on our NAS will then check that our computer is authorized to access the HTTP data that has been requested. If the request is authorized, our NAS will send back data to our computer via port 80. When the data reaches our computer, a service listening in on port 80 will understand that the data it has been sent is HTTP traffic and display it in our web browser. By enabling the firewall on our NAS, we can create a barrier that can either allow or block data. For example, if we do not wish computers on our home network to be able to access web pages stored on our NAS, we could create a rule that will instruct the firewall to block all traffic on port 80. Unfortunately, the firewall on our NAS will not prevent a hacker from exploiting a vulnerability in a service that we have running. So the only way we can protect the services on our NAS is by ensuring that our NAS is correctly configured and that DSM Manager and any packages that we've installed are up to date. This means that a firewall is not some sort of magic security solution, but instead, a firewall is simply a way to give us better control over the data that enters or leaves our NAS. With this heightened level of control, we can prevent a hacker from trying to exploit any services that we may not be aware we have running. We can also use the firewall on our NAS to reduce the threat of an attack. This is done by using our firewall to control which devices can access a service on our NAS based on their location. So for example, we can set the firewall to block all traffic from a specific country or IP address. As the firewall built into the DSM will not be enabled by default, to give us some sort of baseline to help see when the firewall has been enabled, let's quickly load a network scanning tool and then use it to scan the ports on our Synology NAS. While this networking tool has been set to scan only the first 1024 ports, you can see that we have a number of ports open. So as we configure the firewall on our NAS, we will be using these results to give us an indication that our firewall is working. In order to enable the firewall on our NAS, we first need to sign into DSM Manager using our administrator's credentials. Before we start, It might be a good idea to find out which services our NAS is currently running and what port numbers those services are using. If we open Control Panel and then under System, locate and select Info Center. When Info Center loads, by selecting the Service tab, we will be presented with a list of the services that have been enabled on our NAS. By making a note of all of the services which have been marked with a connection status of LAN accessible, we have a simple checklist that we can use to test if services on our NAS are correctly working once we've enabled the firewall. Now from the sidebar, if we select Security and then select the Firewall tab, we are presented with a panel displaying the settings for the firewall built into DSM Manager. The first option is to enable the firewall, so let's select this option by placing a tick in the checkbox. Next, we have an option to enable firewall notifications, as this option will tell us when an application or service has been blocked by our firewall and then offers to unblock that application or service. This option will be invaluable, particularly if we are new to configuring firewalls, so we will also enable this setting. Firewall Profile is used to assign rules that our firewall will follow. If we select the drop-down menu, you can see that we have a default profile ready to use. We then have a series of buttons that will allow us to create a profile, delete a profile, rename a profile, clone a profile, and select a profile from the drop-down menu. Let's start by creating a new profile, and then calling this profile Custom. We now need to select our custom profile from our list. This is to make sure that it becomes the default profile that our firewall will use. To the right of the custom profile is a button called Edit Rules. When we select this button, we are presented with a window. As this profile has no rules associated with it, we now need to create a few rules. You can see in the top left-hand corner of the panel we have three buttons: Create, Edit, and Delete. We can use these buttons to create and manage our rules. To the right of the buttons, we have a drop-down menu which contains a list of the different connection types that our NAS can use. From this list, we can assign different rules to specific connection types. However, for this video, we're going to look at keeping our firewall configuration as simple as possible. So for this demonstration, we will be using all interfaces. Let's select Create and build our first rule. Within the Create Firewall Rules panel, we have three main settings: Ports, Source IP, and Action. As you can see, under the Ports heading, we have three options: All, Select from a list of built-in applications, and Custom. For this demonstration, we will only be using the option Select from a list of built-in applications. However, a much finer level of control can be achieved by using Custom. If we take a quick look at Custom, you can see that we have a number of options that allow us to better control a specific port or range of ports. However, as a home user may not be familiar with how firewall rules work, and it is very easy to create a rule that will lock everyone out of our NAS, Synology allows us to select ports based on a list of most used applications. So let's select Cancel and then choose the option Select from a list of built-in applications. As you can see, we are presented with a list of applications and the port numbers that they use. So the first rule that we will create will ensure that we will continue to be allowed to access DSM Manager once we've enabled the firewall. If we do not create this rule first, we will lock ourselves out of DSM Manager and make our NAS inaccessible to all of our users. So to avoid this mistake, let's locate from the list of applications Management UI, File Station, Audio Station, Surveillance Station, Download Station, CSM. You can see that we have two applications listed. One is for HTTP traffic and the second is for HTTPS traffic. For now, we will tick both options. However, in the future, we may look to block HTTP traffic, so that we only allow traffic which has been encrypted with a HTTPS certificate. After we select OK, we now need to choose our source IP. Once again, we have three options: All, Specific IP, and Location. These options will allow us to filter data traffic either by IP address or from a specific geographic location. However, while this option will give us better control over what traffic is blocked or allowed, for the purposes of this demonstration, we will keep things simple and use the option All. Action simply allows us to choose if a rule will allow or block traffic. As we need to ensure that we can access the DSM after we've enabled the firewall, we need to have action set to allow. When we select OK, our first rule is created. Let's now create a second rule. Our second rule is going to block all data to or from our NAS. The only exception to this rule will be any data that our first rule allows. This means that for both ports and source IP, we need to select All. However, for action, we need to select Deny. When we choose OK, our second rule is created underneath our first rule. We can disable a rule by removing the tick from the checkbox to the left of the rule. We can also move a rule up or down this list, which is very important as the rules in our firewall work based on a hierarchy. So the rule at the top of this list will always be executed first and will override any rules that follow it. So for example, based on the order that our rules are currently in, because the Management UI rule is at the top of our list, we will always have access to Destination Manager even though the second rule is instructing the firewall to block all data traffic to or from our NAS. However, if we were to move the Deny All rule to the top of this list, none of the other rules will be able to let data in or out of our NAS. So by ensuring that our Management UI rule is always at the top of this list, we make sure that we don't lock ourselves out of our NAS. When we select OK, our list of rules are updated. Let's now enable our firewall by selecting Apply. You can see that Custom is now the active profile for the firewall. So if we return to our network scanner and then rescan our network, with our new scan complete, we can see that the firewall on our NAS has now been enabled. We know this because the ports that were open in our previous scan are no longer being displayed. We now need to create some rules that will only allow the active services on our NAS to be accessible through our firewall. So let's return to Destination Manager and add some more rules to our custom profile. The next rule that we're going to add is a rule that will allow Synology Assistant to work once again. As Synology Assistant is the service that will allow our Synology NAS to be discoverable, we need to make a judgment call as to whether or not to create this rule. As we're looking to restore the same functionality that our NAS had before we enabled the firewall, we will create a rule for Synology Assistant. If we select Edit Rules, and then once again select Create, after choosing the option Select from a list of built-in applications, we now need to scroll through the list of built-in applications and tick the option Synology Assistant. After clicking OK, under Source IP, we need to make sure that All has been selected. Then under Action, we need to select Allow. When we click OK, a new rule will be added to our profile. We now need to move the new rule so that it is above the Deny All rule. Let's create our next rule. Once again, we're going to select from a list of built-in applications. However, for this rule, we will now get the network shares for our NAS working. If we scroll down through the list, we will find grouped together the options FTP file server, share files with Mac, Windows file server, and Mac Linux file server. As we have configured our NAS to use the SMB protocol, which is compatible with Windows, macOS and Linux, we will tick Windows file server and select OK. Once again, we will leave source IP set to all and action to allow. When we select OK, a new rule is created which needs to be moved above our Deny All rule. Let's now create a new rule and return to the list of built-in applications. In order to make our NAS discoverable from within Windows File Manager, we need to create a rule that will allow a protocol called Web Services Dynamic Discovery, or WS Discovery, to pass through our firewall. If we search through the list of built-in applications, we should find an option called WS Discovery, so we will tick both of these options. After selecting OK, under Source IP, we need to make sure that All is selected. Then under Action, we need to choose Allow. When we select OK, our new rule is created, so once again we need to move our new rule above the Deny All rule. The next rule that we will create will allow Bonjour traffic. Bonjour is a protocol used by Apple Macintosh computers that will allow us to browse network shares from within Finder. After selecting Create, and then choosing the option Select from a list of built-in applications, we need to scroll through the list and locate Bonjour. After ticking Bonjour and then selecting OK, we once again need to choose All from Source IP and set Action to Allow. When we select OK, our new rule needs to be moved above our Deny All rule. Let's create our next rule. As a number of services such as Audio and Photo Station require that port 80 and port 443 are open, we need to create a rule that will allow web traffic through our firewall. So let's once again select Create and then open Select from a list of built-in applications. From the list, we need to locate Web Station and then select both the HTTP and the HTTPS options. When we select OK, Source IP needs to be set to All and Action needs to be set to Allow. After once again selecting OK, our new rule needs to be moved above the Deny All rule. In a previous video, we configured our NAS to act as a media server. So in order to once again get this service working, we need to create a rule that will open the ports relating to DLNA. After we click on Create, like before, we need to select from a list of built-in applications. Now we need to locate and tick both of the DLNA UPnP media server options. After selecting OK, under Source IP, we need to ensure that it is set to All, while Action needs to be set to Allow. When we select OK, we need to move our new rule into position so that it is above the Deny All rule. While Audio and Photo Station only require port 80 and port 443 to be open, in order to get Video Station to work, we need to make one final rule. So let's select Create and then choose the option Select from within a list of built-in applications. We now need to locate and tick both Video Station options. After clicking OK, this rule also needs to have its source IP set to All and Action set to Allow. When we select OK, we now need to move our final rule into position above our Deny All rule. If the configuration of your NAS is different to ours, you need to review the list of services that you noted down earlier and then create rules for those services. However, as we finish creating our rules, we're going to select OK. As our firewall has already been enabled and our new rules have been saved to the default custom profile, there's no need to select Apply. So let's close Control Panel and return to the network scanning tool. If we once again scan our Synology NAS, you can see that the ports that were open before we enabled our firewall are once again open. However, our firewall will be preventing access to any other ports that we have not explicitly opened on our NAS. We now need to test that the services that we have running on our NAS are still all accessible. So we can use the list of services we noted down earlier as a checklist to test our NAS. For example, we can check that we can once again access services such as audio, video, and photo station. So to recap, in this video, we looked at how to enable the firewall on a Synology NAS. We did this by trying to explain why you would enable the firewall on your NAS, and then we briefly touched on a couple of key concepts, such as services and port numbers. To then demonstrate how to enable and configure our firewall, we walked through the full configuration of the firewall in the Synology NAS that we have been using in this series of videos. With our firewall now enabled, we finally tested that we could access all of the applications and services that we had previously installed onto our NAS. As we've now made our NAS as secure as we can, in the next video in this series, we're going to begin to take a look at the process for making our NAS accessible through the internet.